Hello and welcome to this Tea Time Break Talk. I'm Jessica from Hull Libraries and today I'm with Rebekah Horrigan from St John's Ambulance. Hello Rebekah.
Hi Jessica.
Can you tell us a bit about your work with the St John's Ambulance, Rebekah?
Yep, so I've been in St John Ambulance for around 12 years now. So I joined when I was a student at the University of Hull. And since then I've sort of become a first aider and I've got involved in various things in the organisation, which I'll talk a little bit about. So a couple of years ago I successfully trained as ambulance crew. So that's what I've been doing a lot of in the past year and throughout the pandemic. So right from around a year ago now, so sort of March 2020, we started supporting the NHS a little bit more than we would do normally. So we would normally support the NHS as ambulance crew during the winter pressures, which usually ends around March. But last year, obviously, times were very unprecedented and we ended up supporting the NHS pretty much full time as an organisation. So I was lucky enough to volunteer down in London over Easter last year for a week, which was a very rewarding experience. So, you know, responding to 999 calls across the capital and going into hospitals. And more recently, I've been supporting Yorkshire Ambulance Service a bit closer to home, as well as East Midlands Ambulance Service just over the Humber Bridge, and then up in Gateshead and Newcastle as well. So I've been kind of all over the country, which has been a really enjoyable experience, as well as challenging, obviously. As part of my role as well, I am on the training team. So I train our first aiders and I train level 2 safeguarding as well. And more recently, we have been training the volunteer vaccinators. So we've been training people up to go and volunteer to look after the public as they are waiting for their vaccinations, but also actually delivering the vaccinations as well. I'm also on the safeguarding team, so I do wear lots of different hats. And part of that role usually is going into support units, especially our youth units, because we do have young people in our organisation, and just going and making sure that they're, you know, following safe working practices and that they've got all of the support and resources that they need. More recently, obviously, we've gone to online like everything else has. So a lot of our training is now virtual, including our young people. They're accessing training online, so that they're not actually going into physical buildings very often at the moment, but the safeguarding role is still important because a lot of our young people and adults as well are having increased mental health problems and they need that additional support. So yeah, it's been a very busy but challenging and enjoyable year.
It does sound like it's been hugely busy for you. So have you been out on 999 calls to people suffering with COVID?
Yeah, at times, but it's been a mixture. So it's not always people with COVID. It's a real range of all sorts of people. But we wear exactly the same PPE for everyone, no matter whether they have COVID or not, because we know that some people can be asymptomatic. So we've always got that same protection. So it's not like it's. I think at first there was a lot of unknown around coronavirus, and but now I think we know what to expect, and it's not something that we're fearful of anymore or anything as ambulance crew, because we know that we've got the right systems in place and the right protection. So.
Oh, that's amazing, and I've got such respect for you working in that way. It must have been really, really challenging. So what sort of challenges have you faced during this time and generally with your work with the St John Ambulance?
Yeah, so I think I'm probably facing similar challenges to everyone, in that, you know, life has kind of been a little bit turned upside down. In my day job, I am a teacher, so I've obviously faced challenges in coping with online learning, as well as making sure that, you know, when children are in school, that we're keeping safe and we're keeping socially distanced when, you know, wherever possible. And more recently, we've introducing the testing in school. So there's been lots of challenges in my sort of personal life and my career. I think I'd probably say the biggest challenge has just been learning so much in such a short space of time. So like I said, when I went to London last year, prior to that, I'd only really done ambulance crewing on events, or I've done the odd sort of ambulance shift. Most of the time we do just provide first aid and things on events that people, that's what people know us from, I think. But I had to learn very quickly, you know, how to do a 12-hour shift on an ambulance, get to know all of the different hospitals in London, get to know the people and how things worked. And obviously the new things like with PPE, we had to learn how to put PPE on and how to take it off safely. So yeah, a lot of things to learn in a short space of time. And I guess earlier on in the year, there was a lot of unknowns around, you know, how long we would be working in this way. I think now we've got a bit more of an idea, hopefully, of how long it's going to be. Fingers crossed. But you know, only a short time ago, you know, it almost felt like we'd be in this sort of situation for years. So yeah, it was sort of unknowns and having to learn a lot very quickly.
Wow, it really does sound incredibly challenging. And how do you juggle having such a busy day job, because teaching is so stressful in itself and busy, and then to do the St John Ambulance as well? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I do have to be strict with myself that I don't do too much. I am quite good at making time for rest as well. So, you know, if I get to a weekend and I've booked myself in to do St John volunteering, you know, sometimes it's okay to say no and say, actually, you know, someone else could do that for me. Or especially with the volunteer of the NHS, we're not bound to doing any particular number of shifts. We can be quite flexible in it. So I have been doing things like the odd day in school holidays, for example, when I've got a little bit more time. And yeah, just making sure that I do have days off and not doing something every single weekend.
Yeah, I bet you appreciate those weekends where you can put your feet up for a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually been quite nice in a way being in lockdown, because it just means that I can have days where I literally don't do anything and I don't leave the house.
Yeah, when you're very busy, there is an advantage to that, isn't there? Rebekah, can you tell me if you have a proudest moment with what you've been doing with St John Ambulance?
Well, that's a really tricky one. I think that the traditional answer would be, you know, it's that time when I went to someone who's breathing and I helped them to start breathing again, or, you know, I did a life-saving procedure. But to be honest, the proudest moment that stands out to me was actually quite a sad moment as well. So myself and my crewmate, we attended an elderly lady who unfortunately passed away, and there was nothing more that we could have done for her. But in that moment, we provided her with dignity, and I think that was really important. And actually, what stands out to me about that patient was that the son-in-law afterwards, when he arrived at the care home that she was in, you know, he actually said to us, "Thank you for looking after my mother-in-law." And that really touched us, because we sort of felt like we hadn't really done anything. We hadn't been able to save her life in the traditional way. But it was important to him that she'd had someone with her and looking after her in her last moments. So yeah, I think just the fact that we could have that impact and make a difference, even though it wasn't really the expected or hoped for outcome. Yeah,
that's incredible, because death it's a very personal, very intimate moment, and the comfort that must bring not just to that patient but to the family as well, to know that she wasn't alone and people were caring around her must have been really profound. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And finally, what change would you like to see? Is there anything moving forward into the future that you would like to see for the St John's Ambulance?
I think same as everyone, I'd like to see COVID come to an end, hopefully. I think the biggest thing for me that I'd like to see is the shift in people's attitudes towards volunteers. And especially during the pandemic, there's been so many people volunteering in different ways, not just in St John Ambulance, but, you know, volunteering for the NHS and other charities, you know, making sure that children have got, a packed lunch every day, people who are phoning vulnerable people to make sure that they've got someone to talk to, or doing shopping for them. And I think sometimes people's attitudes towards volunteering is that we don't really know what we're doing, we're just making it up as we go along. And an example would be the most recent volunteer vaccinators that we've been training up to work in the NHS vaccination centres. And some people's attitude to that was, well, I won't want to volunteer giving me an injection. But actually, I think people's attitudes are changing, because they're realising that the training that volunteers have is exactly the same as what NHS employed staff would have. And same with me in my role as an ambulance crew. My training is just exactly the same standard and the same expectations as a paid ambulance crew. So it's not about volunteer versus paid. It's that we are actually professional volunteers, we're not amateurs. So I think that's an important change that I think I'd like to see more of.
And that would be a fantastic change. It goes along with the changes in society about giving as well, doesn't it? And during the pandemic, there's been that sort of outpouring of support for people, and people giving of their time in a way perhaps that they didn't before as well. So it's sort of the flip side to that, really, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely.
That's lovely. Well, thank you very much, Rebekah. It's really inspiring to hear about your experiences and the energy and effort and dedication and passion that you put in to helping other people. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.